Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to Cure Talks. I'm Priya Menon, Scientific Media Editor at Cure Talks, joining you from India. And I welcome all of you this evening to a discussion on what to eat. This is our 80th episode. Nutrition and diet are a popular topic on Cure Talks. And today we once again attempt to tackle the question of what we should eat to stay healthy. Specifically, the issue of animal products. To do so, we have with us two very distinguished panelists. Dr. Colin Campbell is a Jacob Gold Schurman Professor Emeritus of Nutritional Biochemistry in the Division of Nutritional Sciences at Cornell University and a best-selling author. His first book, The China Study, examines the relationship between chronic illness and the consumption of animal products. His new book, Whole, Rethinking the Science of Nutrition, posed serious problems with the way nutritional research is conducted. We also have with us clinical nutritionist, Dr. Kaayla who serves on the board of directors of the Weston A. Price Foundation and Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. World. This discusses the healing properties of animal fats for everything from digestion to inflammation. My co-host of the evening is Julie Duluth. Julie is a professional writer. She's been writing professionally for over 15 years, both as a journalist and as an advertising copywriter. As someone who's experimented with veganism, raw food, juice, and water fasting, as well as GAPS and paleo diets, she is well versed to be moderating the discussion today. Towards the end of the discussion, we will be answering questions sent in via email by our listeners. If you want to ask a question live, please press 1 on your keypad to let us know, and we will bring you on air to ask your question. Welcome to the show, everyone. We are what we eat. But what do we eat? Should we be eating meat? If so, how much meat? Or is a plant-based diet a healthier way of eating? Although Dr. Campbell and Dr. Daniel come from opposing schools of thought, our goal today is to uncover some areas of convergence. With that, I now hand over to Julie to begin with the discussion. Julie, you're on air.
Thank you, Priya. Welcome, Dr. Campbell. And is it Dr. Daniel or Dr. Danielle?
Dr. Daniel.
Dr. Daniel. Wanted to make sure I get that right.
Thank
well,
you.
You should both know that I have a juicer and a Vitamix sitting on my kitchen counter, but I also have homemade bison broth and grass-fed liverwurst in my freezer. So it's truly an honor to be here with you both. We'll get right in. We'll get started right away. People who are familiar with your work know that there's a lot that you two disagree on. But for those who aren't familiar, can you give us each a short summary of what you consider to be the key principles of a health-promoting diet? Dr. Campbell, we'll start with you. What did you learn from the China study?
Well, the China study, first off, is a book. It discussing a broad array of topics and research that I did for over 45 years. The China study itself, that project, that's only one part of it. But what we learned when we looked at the totality of the data, not just the China study, that was only one part of it. What we learned was that the closer we get to consuming a whole food, plant-based diet, the healthier we're going to be on a variety of illnesses that might otherwise occur.
And by whole food, are you specifically referring to plant-based foods or just any food in its whole form?
Yes, I'm sorry. I meant to say a whole food, plant-based diet, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, and so forth. Yes,
yep,
and by
okay.
whole, I mean, for the most part, intact foods, rather than just taking out the sugar or the fat or something like that.
And Dr. Daniel, what is a nutrient-dense diet, and why is it so important to our health?
Well, the Weston A. Price Foundation diet is an omnivorous diet that's rich in animal foods as well as vegetables, nuts, seeds, and grains. You might say we enjoy all of it, a rich variety of it. And I think it's unfortunate that so many health-conscious people today think the most nutrient-dense foods are vegetables because, in fact, the most nutrient-dense foods in the world are animal foods, particularly organ meats. And animal foods provide all the nutrition we find in plant foods and more. So there's an abundance of vitamins, minerals, and other micronutrients, but also lots of protein and fats, which is what makes them dense in calories. So one of the big problems is when people try to attain such nutritional density from plant foods, they have to eat massive amounts of these foods. And that can be far more than most people would like. For example, to get the protein in a 4-ounce piece of steak, for example, they'd have to eat about 9 cups of spinach. And I think that's more than even Popeye might want to eat.
Dr. Campbell, I'd like to give you a chance to respond to that and to get into the studies and the science a little bit more as far as to what led you to the conclusion that the only way to be healthy is to eliminate animal protein altogether.
Yeah, first off, animal foods are not nutrient-rich. I noticed that Daniel referred to protein as being an important nutrient. That's the problem, not the solution. First. Secondly, animal foods have almost no antioxidants. And if there's a class of nutrients that have the most effective, are most effective in preventing disease and creating health, it's the antioxidants. Animal foods may have a little bit if the animal happens to have been eating the plant-based foods prior to their slaughter. So animal foods don't have that. They have too much protein. Protein is a big, big problem. It actually increases cancer and heart disease. That's been known for 100 years. Also, the animal foods don't have any of the complex carbohydrates, which are very important for gastrointestinal health. So the animal foods really, in my view, don't have any nutrients that are not otherwise better obtained from plant-based foods.
Yeah, as I understand from reading your book, Dr. Campbell, you believe that there really isn't a safe level of animal products that we can be eating on a daily basis. Is that right?
Well, the ideal level of protein in a diet is that which is provided by a whole food plant-based diet. That's around 8, 9, 10, maybe 11% protein. And that is actually the number that has been first established as long ago as 75 years ago, and that is reviewed many times since. It's around 10, 11, 12, at 12% or so. The plant-based food, that's all that we need. When we start consuming animal-based protein, two things happen. First off, there's a very significant problem with the protein itself. But more to the point, when we consume that kind of food, we tend to displace the kinds of foods we ought to be eating. And so that's basically a double effect in a sense. The proteins causing problems oftentimes come along with fat. That causes problems as well. And in the process, we decrease the consumption of plant-based foods, and that really makes it a very difficult challenge. Now, some people, of course, can eat more animal protein and animal foods than others. We differ to some extent. But so can some people smoke cigarettes, too, until they're about 90 or 95 years old, and even make a claim they got there because of their smoking cigarettes. That's kind of ridiculous. The number of people that actually can survive that onslaught is really a minor fraction of the population.
So on the one hand, Dr. Campbell, you're saying that animal products are, and the protein specifically, is the cause of chronic illness. And on the other hand, from Dr. Daniel, as far as I understand it, animal fats specifically, if not the cure, are a key part of healing chronic illness. Is that right, Dr. Daniel?
I think we need whole foods, real foods, and slow foods with all the nutritional variety and density they include, and that those become the healing foods. Those are the foods of our healthy ancestors all over the world. And that's essentially what Mother Nature provided us. And there's not a culture in the world that willingly survives on plant foods alone.
Yeah, so you definitely believe that, animal foods are a crucial part of a healthy diet.
Well, absolutely, and I enjoy my fruits and vegetables too, no doubt about that part.
So if you looked down at a plate, Dr. Daniel, at a dinner plate, how would you divide up your plate? What percentage, should be vegetables? What percentage should be animal-based protein?
Well, that's going to vary from person to person. I would certainly have some animal foods on each of my plates, but I'd also have some good vegetables too. And when I'm enjoying those vegetables, whether it's broccoli or spinach or carrots or whatever, there'd be plenty of butter in there so that the beta-carotenes and the lutein and the other micronutrients that are rich in those foods are able to be converted into a form that our bodies can actually use. Because one of the problems with the arguments people have about plant foods being nutritionally dense is that what's in that food is not necessarily what we're able to absorb, assimilate, and utilize in the body. And on top of that, many plant foods contain what we call anti-nutrients or toxins. For example, spinach, even if you agree that it contains a whole lot of protein and other good nutrients, that spinach also contains oxalates that contribute to kidney stones. So eating 9 cups of spinach in lieu of eating some animal food, such as a piece of steak, has that potential problem in there. But your question was about the plate, and I would say a varied plate, not just one thing. Some vegetables and some meat, and some people do tolerate grains well, and if they do, fantastic, and you'll improve the nutritional density if you put some of that good bison broth you mentioned in there instead of water.
Mhm. So I'm hearing, first of all, just some disagreement about even the fundamentals of diet, about what constitutes nutrient dense, how nutrients are absorbed. Isn't science supposed to be the objective third party here? Why is it so hard for us all to agree on the facts? Dr. Campbell, maybe you could start with a little bit of your learnings that you reported in your book, Whole, about how nutritional science is failing us.
Yeah, one of the reasons that there has been so much confusion is because the way we study nutrition and the nutritional properties of foods, we tend to study one nutrient at a time out of context of the whole body. And we can get all kinds of results when we do that kind of thing, misleading results, as a matter of fact. The nutrients should be consumed as foods. We already know, for example, that when we consume nutrients in isolation, as with nutrient supplements, we do not get the health benefits that otherwise might be expected. As a matter of fact, beta-carotene, and I disagree with Dr. Daniels on this, beta-carotene primarily comes from plants. It does not come from liver. And liver is mostly the retinol derivative of beta-carotene. In any case, when there was a study done some years ago now, 20 years ago, a big study comparing people who took beta-carotene from supplements compared to people getting beta-carotene from food. And these were heavy smokers. It turned out that beta-carotene from the supplements actually increased cancer risk, not decreased it. And there's been a lot of studies now showing that. So when nutrients are consumed in isolation, or when we study them in isolation, we get all kinds of interesting products, but they're really irrelevant compared to the whole food. And I don't agree that the oxalate content of spinach causes kidney stones. I know of no evidence showing that spinach causes kidney stones, for example. So I call that process reductionism, and that's what I wrote the book Whole on. It's a very different way of looking at nutrition so that we can get away from this kind of confusion. When we take whole food plant-based diets and we feed them to people, and that's now being done with more and more frequency, people resolve their problems very quickly. We can cure heart disease, even with people with advanced heart disease. This has been done just brilliantly, that whole food, plant-based diet with people with heart disease, their heart disease begins to resolve within a matter of weeks. I mean, it's very dramatic. We can actually cure type 2 diabetes with a whole food, plant-based diet. Same thing. The type 2 diabetes disappears. I would challenge anyone who happens to be listening to this, if they have a heart problem or if they have a diabetic problem, as well as obesity and a number of other things, just try this diet and they can see what happens. The so-called paleo diet, the Weston Price type of diet, cannot do that. The high-protein, high-fat diets, no one has ever done that before. And so the differences are very dramatic.
Okay. To your point about nutrient absorption, though, I mean, do you think that the nutrients from a plant-based diet can be absorbed without things like meat or oils or other foods?
Yes. Yeah, that's a perfect example, actually. It turns out that if there's oxalate in some foods and there's some other things sometimes called anti-nutrients or anutrients that affect absorption in isolation, in reality, that's the way nature works. Nature uses those kind of substances to control the rate of digestion sometimes, the rate of absorption and rate of utilization otherwise. That's part of nature. We study in isolation, of course, we can become alarmed by some of the results we might see. But in reality, if one looks at the content of nutrients in the blood and the functions of those nutrients upon absorption, the levels consumed in plants are perfect. The body has a capacity to choose how much to absorb at any point in time, or how much to digest, or how much to circulate, and so forth and so on. And furthermore, the plants have a very rich supply of all kinds of nutrients, more or less at the right level.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Daniel, I'd like to give you a chance to respond to that now and explain why you think we can't all agree on the facts here.
Well, thank you. I'd first like to say that I did not say that beta-carotene can be found only in animal foods, but I did say that true vitamin A can only be found in animal foods. And most people do need true vitamin A because they're not healthy enough to convert beta-carotene into true vitamin A. And likewise with the vitamin K1 that we find in lots of the greens, we are usually not able to convert that into the true K2, which is what we need the most. And so it goes with these, say, EFA and DHA fatty acids. Yes, we get lots of omega-3s from the plant foods, but most people are not healthy enough to make the conversion. And there's numerous other deficiencies as well. What we see frequently besides deficiencies of vitamin A, D3, and K2 is B vitamins. Everybody knows about B12. There's also B6 and choline deficiencies, CoQ10 deficiencies, carnitine, iodine, calcium, zinc. It goes on. So, yes, there's a lot of nutrition in plant foods, but there are some missing pieces, and many people are coming up short. But where I would agree with Dr. Campbell is that these studies that are coming out of universities today are really funded by people who can take nutrients and turn them into pills and potions and powders and patent them. So that's giving us information that's very limited. It's all about profits and not about education.
Okay, thank you. Right now we're talking about meat and whether or not to eat it, and if you do eat it, how much. But, you could easily substitute any word for meat. It could be salt, it could be oil, it could be coffee, it could be soy, and we'd be having the same circuitous conversation here, which kind of goes back to the idea that no one can seem to agree on the facts. Dr. Daniel, I think this is a good time for you to share some of the science that you wrote about from the Whole Soy Story.
The Whole Soy Story has a subtitle, The Dark Side of America's Favorite Health Food, and I go into 70 years of studies that link soy consumption to digestive distress, malnutrition, immune system breakdown, reproductive system problems, the development of cancer, and even heart disease. But a lot of people do think that I'm the anti-soy lady, and it's surprising to them that I actually enjoy some soy foods, including old-fashioned fermented miso soup. It's wonderful. So the problems really are with modern industrially processed soy foods that are eaten to excess. A little bit of old-fashioned soy foods once in a while in the context of a rich and varied diet, that's fine, and I enjoy it myself.
Thank you. I find myself thinking back to the dramatic examples that Dr. Campbell just talked about curing heart disease and other diseases in a matter of weeks with a plant-based diet. And, you know, if a cancer patient came into your office, Dr. Campbell, from what I understand, you'd put that person on a strict plant-based diet immediately. And if that same patient walked into Dr. Daniel's office, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Daniel, you'd start that person on a very different diet that would inevitably include animal products. And
well, it would depend on the individual. But the reason that so many people initially do well on plant-based diets is not because they've excluded animal products, but because they've cut way back on heavily processed products, products high in white flour and sugar and hydrogenated vegetable oils, and pasteurized milks and many of the really unhealthy products that are a part of the modern diet. And the diet I'm recommending to people would be very nutrient-dense. It would be organic, grass-fed, pastured, free-range. It would be the highest quality animal products and a wide variety of them. And in addition to that, I do agree with Dr. Campbell. There are certain problems with protein, but the protein disagreement I have is with, say, the way some supposedly paleo people will eat only the muscle meats. They're all into steaks and chops. And I'm recommending nose-to-tail eating because the protein we need in our bodies would include the collagen and the gelatin we get from making bone broth out of the carcass of the animals. And we need the organ meats. We need nose-to-tail eating and a variety of high-quality proteins, and that's not factory farm proteins.